I was running around with my children. I'm not really sure, but I think it was intimacy with Christ. So this week, we are going to talk about the gift of obedience, okay? Sorry, I'm only Apple friendly. I don't know anything else. Okay, so is obedience really a gift? Normally, when we talk about obedience, it's never framed in that perspective, that obedience is a gift that we have been given. Normally, your perspective of obedience is that it's something that you offer to God as your gift to Him, right? So it's a little counterintuitive for us to be calling it His gift to us, but I'm gonna just suggest that we reframe your perspective on the concept of obedience, and this will come back at the end, okay? So, why is obedience important, first and foremost, okay? A life of blessing is always built on obedience, but what I'm gonna qualify that with not just obedience, but obedience by faith, okay? What I mean by that is that there's a different intention or a different motivation behind obedience. So for example, if God backs me into a corner and I have no choice and I'm required to only do what He's asked me to do because I don't have any other choice, that's not obedience by faith, okay? That's obedience by necessity, okay? Or if I'm sitting there and I'm weighing the options that He's given me in front of me, and one of them is clearly more logical than the other ones, so I'm going to go and do this one, and that also happens to be the one that He wants me to do. That's not obedience by faith. That's obedience by logic, right? Because obedience by faith is there are no other reasonable indications why you should pursue that option besides the fact that that's what He wants of you. That's obedience by faith. But obedience by necessity, obedience by logic, obedience by whatever, there's a difference there, okay? So today when we talk about obedience, we're going to talk about obedience by faith, okay? That is obviously the hardest type of obedience because generally you have nothing to go on. You have no reason to be doing what you're doing besides knowing that this is what He wants you to do. So that one is definitely the hardest one, okay? The person that we're going to talk about today that did this and owned it is Abraham, okay? Abraham, I'm sure you guys can go and track back all the verses and whatever. Who are these guys that are standing outside? Sorry. Anyways, I'm sure you guys can track back and talk about how Abraham was this pillar of faith. Abraham was this giant of faith, right? But if you think about what Abraham actually did, he didn't really perform any miracles. He didn't really accomplish anything. He didn't he's not Elijah who raised people from the dead and the widow, and he's not Elijah. He's all right, but there aren't really any miracles to his name. But why was Abraham the beloved of God? Why was Abraham the pillar of faith? Because Abraham was the first, right? If you go through the Bible, there's Adam and Eve, there's Cain and Abel, there's the Tower of Babel, and then there's Abraham. Right? Adam and Eve, okay, they're okay at best, okay? Cain and Abel, also, okay at best. And the Tower of Babel, not a success story. And then there was Abraham. So Abraham didn't have, 100 people to look back on and say, okay, God was with so-and-so, and therefore God will be with me. He was that person. He was that person to Daniel, and he was that person to Elijah, and he was that person to all those people. He was the example. But he didn't have somebody that he could look back on and say, oh, well, look what God has done. Look what God has promised. Abraham was the first. And that's why Abraham is the pillar of faith. That's why he's the giant of faith, because he didn't have a success story to look back on and say, oh, this is what God is capable of. This is what God does. Okay? So generally, blessings are preceded by obedience by faith. Okay? Generally, the way this kind of goes is, everything's going well in your life. You're walking with God. You found your groove with God. And then you hit a snag. Okay? And there's some tipping point, and then things either go uphill or things go downhill, okay? Usually, when you're going downhill and you've hit rock bottom and you're trying to reevaluate where things went wrong, you can usually trace it back to the point at which He asked you to be obedient by faith, not by logic, not by necessity, and you weren't, okay? So, we're going to talk about Abraham. Abraham, giant of faith, known as the best at obedience that there ever was, okay? But was he always obedient? No. He wasn't. And this is what I want to talk about. Whenever we talk about Abraham, we talk about like, oh, Isaac, and God said, and so he did, and he's so great, and he has all this like faith and whatever, and that's great. But what I want to tell you, sorry about the soundtrack back there, sorry. What I want to tell you is that Abraham was not always who he was, okay? Abraham did not always have this like point blank black and white faith. He didn't always have it. He started somewhere similar to where we started, and he got to that point. Okay, so let's just start. I'm just giving you all this preamble. Okay, so sorry, I was doing this very late at night last night, so it's maybe not as clear on the screen, so I won't put anybody on the spot about reading. But if anybody has a Bible and or Bible app, feel free to open it up, and then I can get somebody else to talk instead of me. So the two books of the Bible that we're going to go back and forth between today are Genesis and Hebrews, okay? Because Hebrews talks about Abraham, and Genesis is the story of Abraham. So we're going to go back and forth between those two. So we're going to start here. Genesis 12, 1-3. Now the Lord had said to Abram, before his name change, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay? This is God's promise to Abraham, right? This is what he's promising. I will take you to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. That is his promise. Like, do what I say and you will be awesome. That's what God's telling him, okay? What I want to point out is the first part of verse 1. Now the Lord had said to Abraham, okay? Anybody who's not an engineer in this room, okay, who's like has an affinity for languages, what does had said mean? Okay, sorry if there are any engineers in here. Generally they're illiterate, but you may not be an illiterate engineer if you are. Sorry, my whole family's engineers. Can I say that because they're family? Anyways, moving on, okay. The Lord had said to Abram, okay, what does that mean? That means that this is not the first time he's heard this. This is not the first time that God has told him this. If the Lord said to Abraham, the Lord was saying to Abraham, or the Lord told Abraham, that's a present tense, okay? But the Lord had said to Abraham, that means that this is not the first time he's heard this call, or he's heard this promise. This is not the first time that he's been asked of this, okay? So you got to wonder, like, okay, if God is kind of like repeating himself, what happened before that, okay? So just dial back like a few verses back, Genesis 11:31. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, not important, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, blah, 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 his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there, so the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay? A lot of the times when you read stuff like this, you get lost in like all the names, like Terah and Haran and Kate, like what is this? Like what does this mean? Okay? So I just want to like break it down so that we understand what's actually happening. Okay? So God asked Abram to leave Ur, okay, which is where they were. Let's go back to that verse. Okay? To leave Ur, which is where they were, and to go to Canaan. That's what he asked him. Okay? Terah is Abram's dad. He did not ask Terah anything. He asked Abram. Okay? Terah was not promised anything. He was just like a side gig. He was nothing important, okay? He asked Abram. And we know from verse 1 that God had told Abram. So we don't know how many times he told Abram, but this is not the first time Abram's hearing this, okay? So he asks Abram, get up, pick up your world, okay, and move it. You don't know anything about Canaan. You're pretty happy here. You're comfortable. You're whatever, but you have to go. And this is what I'm asking you to do. And if you go, I will make you a great nation. And if you go, you will be blessed. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and blah, blah, blah. You're going to be amazing. But get up and go, okay? But also, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house. Leave everybody that you know. Separate yourself from everybody that you know, and everything that you know. Get up and move. That's what God's asking him, okay? So just a little bit of a visual there. This is the map of where they are, okay? So at the very bottom, you can see Ur, okay, which is where he lives, okay? And then just directly across from that, I wish I had a pointer, old school, okay? Just across from that, you see the land of Canaan, okay? But that's not the journey that he took, okay? He went up to Haran and then down to Canaan, okay, eventually. They had to do that because if you do a straight gun across, it's just desert. Okay, but they're walking up across the river, right? And across the, like, They're walking along the river. That's where like life is. That's where food is. That's where like they get their provisions. That's where everything is. So in order for you to be able to survive comfortably a long journey, it makes sense to walk across the water because the water gives life. Water is everything. Water is plants and everything that you need. Feed the animals, the cows and the goats and the camels or whatever are thirsty. Like that's where everything comes from. So they had to do this big loop to go, okay? Instead of doing a straight gun across a hot desert that is dry, that is not a comfortable journey, okay? Now, God asked Abram to go, okay? Get up, leave your family, leave your father's house, leave everything, and I want you to go to Canaan, okay? But it says here in Genesis 11:31, and Terah took his son Abram and his grandson, and so and so and so and so, and they went out with them from there, from Ur of the Chaldeans, to go to the land of Canaan, okay? So Terah, his dad, went with him. Why? We don't know. I'm going to just disclaimer that we don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but we don't know. Maybe he was a control freak. Maybe he was a helicopter parent. Maybe he was just like, you're not strong enough to do this by yourself. Maybe he can't live without Abram. I don't know. Maybe Abram was the favorite son. I don't know. Okay? But Terah went with him. Okay? On their way to Canaan, they stopped in Haran. Okay? Haran, just for some background, okay, is a very like lush, very like it's a land of good yield because it's in the valley of the Euphrates. So the Euphrates is the river that they're following. Haran is in the valley of the Euphrates. So in the valley of the Euphrates where the water pools, there's like beautiful plant life and the animals are happy and everything's fat and everything is just like yummy. Like it's just like the best place to be. It's comfortable, okay? So there in Haran, okay, if you go back to verse 31, sorry, I know I'm going back and forth. I wish we had like physical Bibles to flip through, okay? If you go to verse 31, it says, and they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay? Did God ask Abram to go to Haran? No. Did God ask Abram to dwell in Haran? No, he didn't. Okay? And from the point at which Abram goes with Terah, okay, like they're supposed to travel this journey and he's supposed to go through Haran and get to Canaan. He's supposed to stop, okay? His pit stop in Haran ended up being 15 years, okay? Not a pit stop, okay? Like obviously their journeys take a lot longer than ours do now, but 15 years, it didn't end up being a pit stop, okay? In that time, in that 15 years that he spent in Haran with his dad until his dad died, there was silence from God. There was nothing. If you go through the accounts, Abram did not hear God's voice again since God called him out to go to the land of Canaan. Nothing. He heard silence. He didn't see God. He didn't hear God. He didn't experience God. He was in Haran, the land of comfort, and he heard nothing. He heard nothing, okay? Haran ended up being like you know when you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to, whatever your chores are, study for exam or whatever, I'm just going to take a quick nap first, and then I'm going to get up and do it. And then your nap ends up being like 4 hours. I mean, maybe that was just me when I was in school. That's what Haran was. It was an unplanned pit stop that ended up taking a very long time. And unfortunately, that pit stop came at a cost because that pit stop was not obedience by faith. God didn't ask Abram to go to Haran. God did not ask Abram to stay there, and God did not ask Abram to take his dad with him. He told him the opposite. Leave everybody behind you and go by yourself to a land unknown. And Abram didn't do that. And unfortunately, the cost of that disobedience was 15 years of silence. 15 years of silence. The lesson here, not the only lesson, the first lesson, okay, is be careful who you yoke yourself to, okay? And like, I mean, I don't want to like hate on anybody's like parents or their close family and friends or whatever, but a lot of the times when God asks you to do something crazy, okay, and I can give you the last 5 most recent examples of crazy things that he's asked us to do, people may not agree. People may not think that that's a good idea. But that doesn't matter because God didn't ask them to do it. We don't know why Terah went with Abram. We don't know why Abram stayed in Haran. Maybe Terah was comfortable. Maybe he was an old man. And he's like, you know what? I can't make the journey to Canaan in the desert. Like, I need to stay here. And Abram's just looking out for his dad. Maybe that's what happened. It's not a bad thing, okay? Abram's not a bad guy. But whatever he did cost him his obedience by faith. Whatever he did, he was no longer obedient to what God had called him to do. And the cost of that was silent. So be careful who you yoke yourself to. There are 1,000 examples of well-meaning family members, beloved ones, friends, whoever. Toby's in the back with me, sorry. He came to collect my children back there, okay? There are a billion examples of well-meaning family members and friends who unfortunately got in the way of God's call to you. It doesn't have to make sense to everybody. It doesn't have to. And you know what? It probably won't. You could probably go and talk to like Abuna Thomas and Abuna John and Abuna whoever, okay? They all have this story of God calling them to a lifetime of service and it being crazy to their family members and their family members trying to stand in the way of it. Like, I mean, I'm not going to comment on their family members and whatever, but is this what God asked them to do? I mean, obviously, they're fantastic priests. It worked out great. So be careful who you yoke yourself to, because you never want the cost of that relationship to be your obedience by faith, because that will cost you so much more than you think. Okay? Just examples like Luke 9:59-62, when there were, Jesus was calling his disciples, and he's like, you, come with me. And he's like, okay, I'm coming, but let me first go and do whatever with my family. And then the other guy, okay, you, come with me, come be my disciple. Okay, but let me go and first bid farewell to my family members. All good things. Nobody's doing anything wrong. But at the end of the day, there's one priority. And the second that you have competing priorities, the second somebody is competing with him for your obedience, it's not a competition. And it shouldn't ever be. You have to let go of what's in your hands in order for you to be able to accept what God has to offer you. Hi, pretty lady. Okay? You have to be able... You want to say hi? Okay, say hello.
Hello.
Okay, very good. Okay, now, do you want to go have a snack at the back? Go. Sorry. Okay. You have to be able to let go of what you're holding on to and what's in your hands in order for you to be able to accept what God is trying to give you, okay? God loves to reward obedience. He loves it, okay? And every time you obey, it's like, okay, so my husband's gonna laugh. I have a problem, okay? My love language is gifts. I love it, okay? So is my daughter's, okay? We love gifts. If anybody wants to get on my good side, buy me things. I love it, okay? So at home, every time something comes up, I have like a pile of, like, we call them surprises, okay? And every time she does something good or we need to reward some kind of behavior or whatever, I always have a surprise to pull out, okay? Because we love gifts. And in the beginning, when we were first learning to like discipline my daughter and we were trying to like learn how to parent her or whatever, I was just like heavy-handed with the gifts. Like, oh, she put something in the garbage. I have a surprise for you. And like, oh, she like said something nice. She gave Tita a hug. Oh, I have a surprise for you. And my husband had to like, dial me back a little bit. Like, not every like pee-pee in the potty gets a gift. Like, she's gonna be like, so materialistic that way. And he was right, okay? And that's fine for me. But that's God. God is just like ready. Like every time he has the opportunity, he's ready to just like hand them out, right? And that's what he wants for you. He wants to just like back and forth. But in order for you to be able to take them from him, you have to let go of what's in your hand first, okay? So my son back there, okay, is, for me, the best example of this, okay? My son loves food, okay? Toby loves food, loves it, okay? And in the beginning, okay, so he feeds himself. We don't feed him. Second child, they fend for themselves, basically, okay? So if you'll see, our house is always a mess because of the way he eats. He's disgusting, okay? Whenever there's food in front of him, he's just like, and he picks it up and he's ready, okay? And there used to be a time where he'd be eating and I'm going to get the next thing that he's going to eat and he's got something in this hand and something in this hand, like if you look in the picture on the right, okay? And he sees what I have in my hand and he cries. He's so frustrated because he wants what I'm going to give him, but he's got two things in his hand. And he's like, what do I do? So he just, like this. He's got one here, and he's like this, okay? Until he learned that if what is in my hand looks better, now he chucks it across the room to take what's in my hand, okay? What Toby learned at age 11 months, minus 3-ish, okay, is what we need to learn as adults, is that in order for you to be able to take what God has to offer you, You have to be able to let go of what's in your hand. And a lot of the times that means separation. It means separation from something that you don't want to be separated from. It may mean a little bit of social separation. It may mean a little bit of separation from your family. I don't know what it is in your life that he's trying to separate you from. But in order for you to be able to take what he has to give you, there has to be some degree of separation. Okay? So, fast forward, okay? So Terah dies, okay? Okay? Now there's nothing stopping Abram from going back to the point at which he stopped obeying. Okay? So now Abram can go backwards. So Acts 7:4, then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran, and from there, when his father was dead, he moved him to this land in which you now dwell. This is like his recount in Acts. Okay? So unfortunately, okay, sometimes things have to go a little bit downhill before they go uphill. I'm sure Abram mourned the passing of his father. Okay? I'm sure that Abram and his father were very close, and that his father's death threw him for a loop. I'm sure. Okay? But at the end of the day, there was no promised land with Terah. The promise was for Abram. It was not for Terah. And as long as Abram was yoked to Terah, there was no promised land. So a lot of the times when things are starting to go downhill, I'd be lying to you if I told you that Christianity was without trials and tribulations. That's not true. Things are going to be bad, and things are going to go badly sometimes, and things are going to be hard. But what I can tell you is that there is design in that, okay? I'm not going to say that God killed Terah so Abram could get the promised land. I'm sure that's not what happened. The guy was like 1 billion years old. But what I'm going to tell you is in those moments when things are starting to go downhill, there is a design behind it. There is something that he wants you to be out of that. There is somewhere where he wants you to go after that. Okay? So, Genesis 12:4. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. He was an old man. Okay? 75 years old. Okay? So picture this. They've been living in Haran. They set up shop. They're having kids. Not Abram, but everybody else is having kids. Their cows are having kids. Their camels are having kids. Everybody's comfortable. They're in the valley of the Euphrates. Everything is comfortable. Okay? Abram is 75 years old. Okay? Terah dies. Everybody's mourning the death of this man. And Abram says, okay, everybody, pack up. What? But there's water here. There's growth here. There's providence here. Everybody pack up. But you're an old man. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. We're comfortable here. We don't even know what's in Canaan. We have to travel across the desert to get there. There's no river to help us get there. We're going to starve. We're going to thirst. Pack up. Okay? We're comfortable. What language do they speak in Canaan? Abram has no answers. Okay? He's never been there before. He has no idea what's in Canaan. He has no idea what they're going to do there. He has no idea why God has asked him to go. He has no idea. All he knows is God said go. When he started, God was with him. When he stopped, God was not. So Abram says, pack up. We're going to Canaan. Okay? By faith, Hebrews 11:8-10, okay? By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Okay? No clue where he was going or what he was going to see. Nothing. God had not told him anything about Canaan. Okay? By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. This is obedience by faith, right here, okay? In the beginning, when we were talking about the difference between obedience by faith versus obedience by necessity versus obedience by logic, this is it. Abraham had no assurance of what was to come. Abraham had no reason to think that he was going to be cared for, his family was going to be cared for, that they were going to be able to get by, that they were going to be able to, speak the language. He had no idea what was coming, nothing, okay? And there was no reason for him to leave where he was. Haran was comfortable. It was the valley of the Euphrates. It was great. Everybody was happy there. Everybody was comfortable. This is obedience by faith. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Our perspective is here, okay? Abraham's perspective was up here. This looks great, okay? Where I am, Haran is fantastic, okay? But if God said Canaan is better, then Canaan is better. If God says that that's where I need to be, I don't care what it looks like, it's better. Because what God has in store for me is what I don't know that I want. But because he said, I know that I want it. That's Abraham. That's obedience by faith. There is nothing for him to go on except for the fact that God said. That's it. That's Abraham. Okay? Why is obedience a gift? Okay? Why in this series are we calling something that you do a gift? Okay? Let's see what happens when they get to Canaan. So, they came to the land of Canaan. Okay? Abraham's obedience is complete. Okay? I just want to make this point here. Okay? You don't get an A for effort. You don't. You get an A for outcome. Okay? If God tells you, go and do X, okay? And you say, I started, but you didn't do it. It's a yes-no question, okay? Don't stop until your obedience is complete. Okay? Don't stop until you have done what he's asked you to do, okay? Abraham, okay, started off leaving from Ur, going to Canaan, okay? Great. You're doing great. But when he got to Haran, he was not obedient. And he could have said, I tried, I did, I whatever, but Terah, but whatever. Fine, okay? Maybe all of your excuses are very valid. But in Haran, was he obedient? He was not. Okay? So don't stop until you get there. There is no partial obedience. It's a yes-no question. You do or you don't. That's it. Okay? Because if this is something that he's called you to do, you will get there because he wants you to do it. As long as you are willing. Your pit stop in Haran does not make that obedience. Okay? So, they get to Canaan, okay? They get there. This is here. This is what God's asked me to do. This is what I've been promised. Like, he's probably like ready, like walking in, like, what is he going to see? Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were in the land. So he gets to Canaan. There's a tree, and there are Canaanites. Yay. Like, anybody else but Abram would have gone there and been like, okay, like, nice tree, but like, where's the climax to the story? Like, where's the, like, 15 years in Haran. Like, and there's Canaanites, okay? People already own this place. That's like saying God has bought you a palace, okay? You he talked to the real estate agent already and you own it. It's yours. You got this. Here's the keys. You walk in and there's another family who already lived there. And they're unpacked and they're cooking dinner in the kitchen. And their kids are napping in their bedrooms, like mine should be right now. And you're just like, what am I doing here? This is not mine. Like, it's the land of Canaan. It's the Canaanites. It's theirs. It's not yours. It's theirs. They were here first. Like, what are they doing here? Okay? I would have been mad. If it was me, I would have been mad. Like, what would you bring me here for? Like, am I going to fight these people for their own land? Like, I have no rights here. This is theirs. Okay? But Abraham. 2 Corinthians 4:18. Well, we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Okay? Abram didn't see all that. He didn't see that, like, nice tree. Like, he didn't see that the Canaanites were there and they're, like, this is their land. All he saw was, God has promised this to me. This is where we're going to be. Until he tells me to pick up and go somewhere else. That's all he saw. He didn't see the things which are temporary. He saw the things which are eternal. God promised me, and therefore, this is where we have to be. But it doesn't make any sense. There are already people here. Where are you going to stay? It doesn't matter. God said, so here I am. That is obedience by faith. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. 15 years of silence, okay? If you go back to Genesis 12, verse 1, it says, God had said to Abram, right? We talked about past tense and whatever. God had said to Abram. Then the Lord appeared to Abram. Already this is a step up, right? We go from being told to being in the presence of. Okay, God's back. Abram was obedient, God's back, okay? Abraham, if you go through the life of Abraham, it's a 20-week series, okay? Because the life of Abraham is awesome, okay? He didn't have a lot of earthly blessings. Like, he was promised many descendants and he had them, but he didn't see that many of them. He was an old man, okay? Like, even this promised land, if you go further on in the story, he didn't stay here for that long. Like, he lived the life of a pilgrim. He was moving all the time. He lived in a tent for his whole life, okay? But to Abraham, his life was the most blessed because everything God asked him to do, he did. And to him, that was the pinnacle of blessing. And it should be to all of us. There is nothing better in this world than what God has asked for you. That's it. There's nothing better. So to Abraham, he's the luckiest guy in the world. Luckiest guy in the world. Because everything God asked him to do, he did it. And he got it. And he was there. Luckiest guy in the world. To Abraham. Okay? Now, last part of this talk, okay? I just want to take a few common themes from Abram's life and from this story of Abram's life and talk about what that means for us, okay? What does that mean for our gift of obedience, okay? So, this verse, okay? Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land," and there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west of on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abram journeyed going on still toward the south. There are a few words there that I've highlighted, okay? Those are the things that I want to talk about in this next section, okay? So there are three common themes in that passage, okay? Tent, altar, promise, okay? Those are the three things I want you guys to get out of this talk. If you haven't heard anything else that I said, this is it. This is where you tune in, right here, okay? Tent, altar, promise, okay? Abraham, from the point when he got to Canaan, or actually from the point where he left Haran, he lived in a tent for the rest of his life, okay? He didn't have a dwelling. He didn't have a house that they build, or it wasn't like houses, it was like dwellings. They used to build dwellings, and that was their roots. That was them putting something down, okay? He didn't have that. He was in a tent from age 75, so the point where he left Haran, until 175, okay? He was always on the move, always. Even in Canaan, God asked him to go there, and there was this big fuss, and he was disobedient, and then he was obedient to whatever. Even Canaan, he stayed there that long, okay? He was always on the move, always picking up his tent and moving his whole entourage wherever God asked him to go, okay? Abraham was a pilgrim, okay? Why is this important? Why does that make Abraham a giant of faith? Because of that separation that we talked about, okay? Abraham was not yoked to anything of that world. There was nothing that tied him down. He maintained that separation. He refused to assimilate. Even in doing business with the Canaanites, he refused. He's not going to assimilate. And even in finding a wife for his son Isaac, he went to the ends of the earth to find her a wife because he refused to have anything tie them down. Refused. He was the life of a pilgrim. Why would he choose this? He's an old guy. A life of travel is not comfortable for somebody who's an old guy, okay? Abraham understood that there is nothing in this world that you shouldn't be willing to drop for him. Nothing. And there is nothing in this world that should come at the cost of your gift of obedience. Nothing. Because obedience, I'll just keep talking, pretend that didn't happen, okay? Because obedience is one of the best gifts you've ever been given. So to Abraham, obedience is up here. Everything else is not even close. And whether that came at a cost of their comfort, their whatever, there is nothing in this world that is worth tying him down at the cost of the gift of obedience. Nothing, okay? That passage that line in the liturgy when we say, "We too who are sojourners in this world," Abraham is the sojourner. Abraham is I am not going to make my bed here because this is not for me. What's for me is what he says. And if he says go, I got to be ready to go. That's why he lives in a tent, okay? There should be nothing that you are not willing to drop. And unfortunately for us, that separation is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. When you do something and your closest family and friends strongly disagree with you, that's going to hurt. That's not going to sit well, okay? The only reason that that's something that you can commit to doing is because he's asked it of you. And even despite the fact that he's asked it of you and you know it to be correct, you don't want to live in that separation from everybody. But unfortunately, okay, communion with him comes at a cost. And unfortunately, a lot of those things that we don't want to separate prevent us from being in communion with him. Just like Toby, you got to be able to drop what's in your hands in order for you to take what he has to offer you. And we know that what he has to offer you is better than anything anybody else here can provide, separation or relationships included. Abraham knew that, and that's why he lived in his tent. And Abraham built altars. So what do altars symbolize? Okay, like right now, it's like a really nice, like shiny part of the church, and it's great. Okay, but back then, altars were where you made sacrifice. Okay, the sacrifice was always offered up on the altar. So every time it tells you in the story of Abraham where he went so and so and so, and then he built an altar. Okay, with the altar comes the sacrifice that he offered up. Okay, sacrifices bring hardship, or they bring difficulty. Okay. I can't sugarcoat that for you, okay? The altar symbolizes sacrifice, and it's a sacrifice that you have to make. And it's usually something that you don't want to sacrifice. I can't make that easier for you, okay? And when you're sacrificing it, and when you're being called to sacrifice it, it sucks. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you, okay? I am a very, very social person, as you know, okay? There's extroverts, introverts, okay? Extroverts like me get their energy from being in social situations, okay? That's me, okay? We get married, and God picks us up and says, you got to go to Hamilton. Even now when I think about it, I cringe a little bit, okay? Hamilton was great. The people in Hamilton are great, okay? Got nothing against Hamilton. But it was away from everything I knew. All the social, and I was very social. Like, my friends, my family, yeah, more my friends. Like, my service, my social life. Sorry, my husband's giving me the death stare back there. I have no friends now, okay? Like, my everything, okay? Unfortunately, that was the sacrifice that he asked me to make at that moment, okay? And at that period of time in our lives, it was the biggest sacrifice for me because I'm like, what am I going to do? You're taking me up to like a mountain, literally lived on the mountain in Hamilton, like just by ourselves. My husband has exams. I didn't see my husband until a year after we got married, okay? Because he was studying for his exams. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? It was a sacrifice that I didn't want to make. But the fruit of that sacrifice is communion with God, okay? When Abraham was living in Haran, there was silence. But the second his obedience was complete, the Lord appeared to him. He didn't just tell him, he appeared to him. The fruit of that sacrifice is communion with him. People always ask, like, oh, why do when people go to Africa, they hear God? Like, what, God's not in Canada? Like, he doesn't live here? Like, and they get this like, well, if you can't find God here, then you probably won't find him in Africa. So, whatever, okay? I went to Africa. I found God in Africa. You want to know why? Because we lived in a tent, okay? We were separated from everything. We were separated from all the distractions here. We were separated from all the comforts of here. We lived a life of sacrifice because there was no water. We didn't shower. We sacrificed our cleanliness, okay? That's why it's easier to hear them there because of this concept. Because tent and altar, okay? Separation and sacrifice. That's why you can hear him there. It's not that he's not here. He's here. He's very much here. We just prayed a liturgy. He's on the altar right now, okay? For those of you who have communion, he's here, okay? But over there, you are forced into a life of separation and sacrifice. Over there, all the things that you don't want to do here, they make you do over there. And that's why you hear him. That's why you see him. That's why it's clear. It's not that he's not here. It's because you live a life of separation and sacrifice for however long you're there. And that's where he is. That's where you find him, because the fruit of that separation and sacrifice is communion with him. I can't sugarcoat this for you. I can't. If you want him, if you want that gift, it's separation and sacrifice. There's no way around it. There's no like loophole to this like formula, okay? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Christianity is sacrifice. Communion with him is sacrifice. A relationship with him is sacrifice. Abraham could have like lived in Haran and read the Egbeah 100 times a day and like Matanyas, left, right. He could have done all that. It doesn't matter. He wasn't obedient to God. He wasn't able to make the sacrifice that he was called to make. And that's why there was silence. Okay? But what about the promise? Okay? What about the promise? So, I just want to make one more distinction, okay? The words are not up there anymore, so it's going to be hard to visualize. So I'll try to talk a little bit slower, okay? The first verse, Genesis 12:1, God told Abraham, I will bring you to a land that I will show you, okay? So Abraham's perspective is keep the tent packed because God's going to show us and we're moving on, okay? I'm going to go, ooh, really nice, great tree, and we're moving on, okay? After the completion of the obedience, God says to Abraham, then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your descendants, I will give this land. Okay? It went from a land that I will show you to a land that I will give you. Okay? Every time you are able to commit to that obedience by faith, there is more promises. Okay? The initial promise, the only thing that Abraham could hold God to was a land that I will show you. Okay? That's it. That's all God promised. A land that I will show you. But once there was obedience, God said, no, more. Get the bag of surprises, okay, from the dining room. Now there's a land that I will give you, okay? Every time there is obedience, God wants to give you more. It opens the door to new promises. The initial promise is great, and you get that too, but there's more, okay? Like, see what Millie's wearing right now, okay? That was like part 1 of 2, okay? She had a good day yesterday. She was a very good girl yesterday, okay? That was part 1 of 2, okay? That's God. God is just like ready. He has a big, like bottomless bag of surprises, okay? And he's ready. He was supposed to only show Canaan to Abraham, but no, this is yours. This is the land that I will give you. Anytime that's why obedience is his gift to you. Okay? Because with obedience comes new promises. Things that you didn't know that you were promised. Things that you didn't know he wanted to give you. That's why it's a gift to you. It's not your gift to him. He doesn't care. He doesn't need you. Okay? But you need this obedience. You need like the being refined by the separation and the sacrifice that comes with obedience by faith. And when you get this from him, you also get promise after promise after promise after promise. And it doesn't stop where you think it stops. It's limitless. That's why, like, Abraham knew that there was nothing that should come at the cost of his obedience. That's why Haran for Abraham was life-changing, okay? After Haran, Abraham became this, like, giant of obedience. I always look, when I'm reading the story of Abraham, there is no, like, back and forth between Abraham. I remember there was one time I was preparing a lesson, and I was looking for an example of where God and Abraham spoke to each other. There isn't, because God spoke, Abraham did. There was no back and forth, nothing. Look at his entire story. God spoke, Abraham did. After Haran. Because Haran was life-changing for Abraham. He realized the gift of obedience. He realized like the tent altar promise, and that was it. For the rest of his life, until age 175, God spoke, Abraham did. No questions asked. Isaac included. That's it. Sorry. Any questions? Sorry, I know they always come to like an abrupt end. Anyways, if I had to give you anything from today, it's tent, altar, promise. Tent plus altar equals promise. Separation plus sacrifice equals promise after promise after promise after promise. I'm so good at faking it, it's unreal. Really, really, so good at it. My husband says I should have been a lawyer. I really should have been a lawyer. There's books. I just read a lot of books. I like reading books. Anything? No? All right, very good. Oh, leaders of OnRoute. No, it's usually announcement.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Can we give Sarah yeah, that's it. That's it. I didn't even need to ask you guys. All right. So, anybody's first time at OnRoute? Don't want to put you on the spot. What if it's your first time? Put your hand up. Awesome. Welcome. Welcome. All right, so we do this pretty much every Sunday, 11:30 till about 12:30. From 11:30 to 12, we have food and fellowship. At 12, we start our talk. This is the second week of this series. We have 2 more weeks to go. And next week, I believe, is going to be a talk about trust. And the last week is, I think, the gift of reverence. I think Sarah said that to me. So we look forward to seeing you guys in the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask myself or Christine. And if you're not already on our mailing list, please come and find us after. And we'd love to add you on our mailing list so you can get all the upcoming news and any updates and series and events and all that stuff for OnRoute. And yeah, have a beautiful Sunday. And we can just say a quick prayer. And you're welcome to stay after and finish the food and continue fellowship.